So continuing on making some improvements to our layout, let's continue with this navigation bar here, okay? So right now we've got this default look for the navigation bar, okay? So what I can do to change it is go up here on line 10 where we open this navigation tag right here, this HTML tag. Hopefully that's line 10 for you. If not, that's okay as long as everything's still working for you. And what we can do here is change this navbar dash default to navbar dash inverse. Okay, that's just a Bootstrap class, the navbar dash default is, and this dash inverse is just a different Bootstrap class. And if I save that, I've got my server running here in a different tab. And if yours isn't running, remember, just type in that bundle exec Rails server command from the root directory of this application, so from your application directory. And then when I refresh here, there you go. Now you've got this inverted look. It's a black navigation bar. So I'm going to leave mine like that. But I want to show you something really interesting. There's a site that you can go to, and if you search for UI gradients in Google, you'll find a site called uigradients.com. Hopefully this site is still around for you when you do this search. It may or may not be there, but if it is, that's great. And then what you can do is go over here down at the bottom and click to see a bunch of different gradients that are kind of pre-made for you. Okay, so this is a great little site where you can kind of achieve some really fancy looks really easily. And what we can do is find one that we like. So let's say we want to go with this Venice blue one here, and you click on it, and then from there you can click this get CSS code down here at the bottom. And again, this layout might be different for you if the author of this site changes it over time, but just keep in mind all you're looking for is this get CSS code. You want to get a copy of the CSS code here. And that's the point of this site. It allows you to basically copy some CSS to generate this beautiful gradient here for free. So if we click on that, there's the CSS code. You can kind of highlight it and copy it, or just click this copy to clipboard. And then from there, we can apply it to our site. Now, something I want to point out here, this is really interesting. This is kind of the beauty of web development, right? You can kind of stand on the shoulders of giants. You can kind of work with other developers and not have to reinvent the wheel. If you find something really cool that's out there on the web and the developer or author who put it out there is, open to putting it out for free or giving it out on some kind of a license that you can use, then that's great. That's the great thing about web development. You don't always have to build everything from scratch. And you technically shouldn't, sometimes you shouldn't always want to reinvent the wheel. So it is great, however, to give credit where credit's due. So it would be good to kind of mention this, the author's name somewhere in our site if we want to. So if we go over here back to Nitrous, we can apply this now by going over to the application.css.scss file. Okay, so that's under style sheets, which is under your app folder here. So app, assets, style sheets. And we could add it right here. So I could say, and let's say I want to add it to this nav bar. I want to change this black nav bar to something else. The way I can do that is go back to this application.html.erb file, the layout file that I had open. And I'm looking here at this navigation tag, right? This is the opening tag of this nav bar. And I see that it's got this class name here called navbar. So what I can do is then go back over to my CSS file here, the application file, and I can just type .navbar. And that's going to target using CSS classes, right? We learned this a while back. And just target that particular HTML element there. And then I can hit paste and paste in everything that I copied from this UI gradient site. And just to give credit, I'm going to copy this URL here. And in a comment, I'm going to say, and in Sass, you can actually comment just with 2 forward slashes. Gradient from right there. And I'm going to save that. And now if we go back and refresh, you'll see our navigation bar looks a little bit different now. It looks a little bit cooler. It's got a nice little vibe to it. And we could even apply this to the entire body of the site if we wanted. So I could go back here, and instead of targeting the nav bar, I can leave everything the way it is and instead just target the actual body tag itself of the HTML. So this body tag right here, and everything within it is going to have this background color. So if I go ahead and refresh now, you'll see the nav bar switches back to black, and we've got this nice gradient background over here. So you can play around with that. I just wanted to show you that for fun. And I also wanted to kind of, plant that seed in your mind about this idea of not having to reinvent the wheel. Now, all that said, I do want to emphasize that you should really understand what you're doing. So you don't want to just blindly add code to your site. So in the case of these UI gradients, you really want to get to understand exactly how these things are created. And you can do that by using all the abundant resources out there on the web. So at this point, if we go over here to this application.css.scss file, right, it's starting to become a little bit crowded in here. Okay, we're adding a lot of code here, and we're also overriding our Bootstrap code a little bit if we, want to change the nav bar and whatnot, like we were experimenting with. And so it's a good idea to kind of reorganize this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file here inside this style sheets folder. So under app, under assets, and then right here under style sheets, I'm going to right click on the word style sheets, and then I'm going to click on new file here. And let's give it a name. We'll just call it custom for now. We'll just call it custom.css.scss. And then I'm going to hit enter. This is where we're going to put all of our, kind of custom code. And so instead of putting this stuff here in this application file like we have it, I'm just going to copy this or cut it out. So on a Mac, I can do Command X to cut it. On a PC, you should be able to do Control X. And then I'm just going to open up this new custom.css.scss file, and I'm going to paste it in here, everything that we have there. So I'm going to save that. And if we go back here to this application file right here, just make sure we've saved that as well. Now, if I go back, the server is running. If I go back to our browser window, we'll see everything should still look exactly the same. Okay, so all we've done is just reorganize the code. So I also want to talk about these files here inside this assets directory, okay? At some point when Rails was being developed, around version 3, okay, the developers added this feature called the asset pipeline, and you can read about it if you just search for Rails asset pipeline. And if you click on this first link here, you'll see a great website, and I'll talk about this site here in a second. But now, the asset pipeline, I just want to explain it briefly for you, what it does. Okay, so for us, in this assets folder, we've got this images folder here where we're going to store any images on the website. Okay, we've got this JavaScript folder here. That's where we're going to put any of those, JavaScript code related to interactions or other things like that. And then finally, we've got style sheets. This is where we put our styles, our CSS code, or our Sass code, as we call it, with the SCSS extension here. So something that you should note is that, we've got it organized like this, and that's nice for us, but we don't want to be shipping off all these individual files for our users, for our customers, okay? And the reason why is the more files you pack into your website, the slower it is to load. And the fact is, speed really matters, okay? In this day and age, speed matters a lot. And you might consider yourself a patient web surfer. You might be patient and wait, 5-10 seconds for a page to load. But the analytics and the statistics show that customers leave your website if it takes a long time to load. And the statistics are pretty overwhelming at this point. So I just want you to know that speed really matters. There are actually tools out there that you can use to measure speed. So Google's got a great one. It's called Google Page Speed. So if you search for that, you'll find this tool here. And you can enter any website into their page speed analyzer over here, and it'll tell you the speed of that actual site. And that's really great to get a sense of how fast sites are or to compare your site with other sites. So speed really matters. You can read all about it on the web. If you're working for a big corporation or a small startup, it doesn't matter. If you really value your customer experience, you need to keep your site fast. So that's what the asset pipeline does. It keeps the site fast. And the way it does that is instead of delivering separate individual files like this over to the user when the user gets it, on production, it'll combine all the CSS files, okay, into one minified CSS file. We call it minified. And that just means it's optimized, all the white space gets stripped out. It just becomes a much faster delivery of the CSS. And it does the same thing here for the JavaScript. It'll minify all the JavaScript and really compress it down as small as it can be so that when it delivers it to the user, it'll be very quickly. It'll load very quick for the user. And that's ideal. Now, it'll only do that on production by default. So when we deploy this code over to Heroku, that's when we'll see the benefits of those speed improvements. Over here on our development tab right here, we're not going to see, as much of that speed improvement, and that's okay. We're here to develop, and we want to keep our files kind of separated and not minified. We don't want to see everything kind of smushed together. We want these spaces here. It helps us to look at things. So remember, that's the benefit of the asset pipeline. So I wanted to mention that because as a Rails developer, you really should know about that. And that brings me to my next point here. This site that I pulled up, okay, if you look for asset pipeline space Rails, okay, in Google, which is what I searched for earlier, you'll find this website called Rails Guides, okay? And I'll probably bring this up over time, multiple times, but I want you to get into the habit of reading through this site over time, okay? You don't have to read it all at once, but it's a really well-written site, and it helps you to really understand each of the elements of Rails. So as we cover something in our learning here, I want you to go over to this site and kind of read about what we've covered, and it'll really start to make sense over time. So one last thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to go back here and I'm going to get rid of this background gradient. You can leave it in, there's no harm for you. So we're inside of this custom CSS file here. I'm just going to delete it for now. And again, you can leave that in. You can also, if you want, just affect the nav bar and play with other gradients if you want, just paste them in there. So for example, I'm just showing you right here, if I refresh this, the nav bar has been affected and so on. So feel free to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and just cut it all out for now and keep it a little bit more basic. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to go back here and refresh. And we've still got sometimes you have to hold shift and then click refresh for it to fully refresh. So I'm going to keep my nav bar inversed, that's fine. And I'm going to go back over here now, and I've saved all my files, and I've got another tab open, and I'm just going to save this work. So git status, okay, and I'm going to do git add, and then a dot, and then git commit -m, and I'm just going to say reorganized CSS. I'm going to hit enter, and then we're just going to back this up to GitHub. So I'm going to say git push origin, and I'll just copy this code right here, the name of the branch, click right here, and then hit enter. So there we go. We've just learned a little bit more about the asset pipeline, and we've made a few more modifications to our website.